When I was a teenager, I was skinny, my nose was sort of too big, I had terrible cystic acne, I was awkward, my body just didn't sort of move right, I was very uncomfortable in my skin, and my voice was kind of weird and deep for my baby face. And I was bullied quite a lot, because I was an awkward kid, so people just sort of picked on me because I was a good target, and I was shy and a little bit weird, so it made sense for people to pick on me. But at the end of 10th grade, moving into 11th grade, I suddenly sort of grew into my skin and I became much better looking. I shot up in height, I was suddenly tall, my nose stopped looking so big, and my cystic acne cleared up because I was taking Rakitan. This was also the time I first started to work out, and so my body got a little bit more muscular and athletic as opposed to just being straight up skinny. And wouldn't you know it, people were suddenly much nicer to me. And this really pissed me off because the people who were nice to me now were still mean to people that they'd been mean to the whole time who hadn't gone through the same gulp that I'd gone through. And it showed me how superficial and fickle everybody really was. But my life became better and easier. Not only did I get more attention from women, and women started flirting with me and being nicer to me, but guys started to want to be my friend more. And people just sort of started to automatically respect me more than they had at any point beforehand. I did lose out on a lot of like the pity points that I used to get before that. There was certain people, certain demographics, usually like parent age people who obviously felt bad for me, and they were nice to me as a result of that, and I lost that particular faction, and suddenly people weren't as nice to me out of sympathy and pity as they once were, but on average people were nice to me. When I went to university and I was speaking to people that I studied with, and we were talking about high school stuff, they all automatically assumed that I was the popular guy in high school who did well in sports and all that sort of stuff, none of which was true at all, but my new appearance made it seem as though it was that way. I'm not trying to brag right now. I'm just making the point that I've experienced both sides of the aesthetics hierarchy and the impact that it has on people. And I do totally get the memes of like the better looking dude being funnier and smarter without ever actually having any proof for it. The halo effect is very real. This is also why I think black pill stuff and Looksmaxxing is pretty fucking stupid. There have always been two schools of thought about beauty. Some people tell us that beauty is only skin deep and that we should focus on a lot more than that, the personality, that we should ignore the superficial cues and biases. While others promote beauty, they sell products, courses, or on social media, they use Photoshop and filters to present an unrealistic version of themselves to the public. And this has created a culture of extreme superficiality, where all people focus on is their external presentation, and they become vapid shells of humans. But almost ironically, the more you chase artificial beauty, the uglier you actually become. And those who condemn beauty and its importance in life end up bitter and angry and twisted because the world doesn't treat them as though they'd hope to be treated. And they get mad because good-looking people do get slightly better results out of life. I think both sides are wrong. There is more to life than just looking good, but the way we present ourselves to the world is also very important. But this isn't just in the way that we look. I'll explain that later. But we can't hope that people will just ignore the way we look and focus on our personality when we don't take care of ourselves at all and we're quite frankly quite disgusting to look at. The first thing people notice about us is the way we look. That's pretty much unavoidable. If someone is particularly unfortunate looking, no one's going to give them the time of day to find out how great they are. It does go beyond that. We do perceive good-looking people as more intelligent, kind, friendly, helpful, capable, whatever. There's been scientific studies to prove this. Now, if you're a chronically online individual, the world seems a lot more dreary than it actually is. Our mindsets are heavily affected by what we consume. And often the media we consume is heavily biased towards negative stuff because our brain is more wired to focus on negative information than it is to focus on positive information. Why is this? Because remembering where you found some berries that taste good isn't as advantageous as remembering where the berries are that killed your friend. So when it comes to media, it's not that there's some organization out there that wants to control your mind and make everything seem much worse than it actually is. it's actually caused by you and by people as a whole, but particularly you. I used to work for a news company, and in the editorial meetings, we would discuss what stories would go out for the day. And after a while, we got a bit annoyed about the fact that most of the stories that were going out were negative, and that our audience was engaging with that the most. So we decided to put out some good hope stories, some stories that would improve people's feelings, something positive about the world. No one read them. Nobody cared. We got zero engagement. They were distributed in exactly the same way as our negative stories, and in fact, they got even more promotion, but nobody cared. And yet, when we found a particularly negative story, the amount of engagement and reads would be through the roof. Because people just weren't interested in the happy stories. People were seeking out something to get upset about and complain about, because it targeted a higher state of emotion in their brain. And social media is the greatest exaggeration of that. Your feed is full of content which isn't necessarily the best for you, because our brains release more chemicals for negative emotional reactions than positive ones. And as a result, we engage more with negative content, so that is given to us on our feeds. So why is this particularly relevant to what we're talking about? Well, if you are a young guy who doesn't have much money and doesn't feel particularly good about the way you look, your feed is going to be full of content that tells you that looks are the only thing that matter. It's all going to be content which tells you you're not good enough. You'll receive content of average, mid, 3 out of 10 women talking about how they want a man who makes $1 million a year, is 6'5", has a six-pack, and looks like Henry Cavill. And they deserve it because that's what women deserve. Women are just on a higher quality, and men have to meet that standard or they fall behind. Even though they're clearly delusional, if you spend all your time online, and if you're engaging with this content, you're going to see more of it. And you're going to start believing that the ideas of this delusional woman reflect the ideas of every single woman. And you become hopeless because you think, fuck, I'm going to be bitchless forever. And the same goes for women. If you're a woman who's had some pretty bad experiences with men, your feed is more likely going to be other women complaining about how men are shitty or men behaving shittily. That's not a real word. So you're just going to end up getting more isolated and radicalized than you would have been in any other context. And this is why there has been such an uptick in black pill incels, and especially with the Looksmaxxing stuff, where men are told that if they don't have the perfect facial symmetry and like the right kind of eyes and the right kind of jaw structure and bone structure, and if they're not tall enough, and if their PSL rating's too low, it's over for them. They're done. Now these guys who take the black pill are just straight up wrong. And you may find that confusing after the story I told you about myself in high school. While having a good PSL rating and being a 6'5" giga chad certainly helps with getting women, and my improved bone structure and general aesthetics certainly helped me a lot with getting more women, it isn't the only thing that actually matters. Now, if you go outside, not to touch grass, but just to observe, you will see many men who would be described as subhuman, according to many of these forums, with really pretty girlfriends. And it's not because he's rich or she's blind or he's got a massive or anything along those lines. It's just because his looks aren't the only thing that makes him attractive to her. And he probably also makes an effort. Looks open the door, but they don't keep you in the room. And there are other ways to get into the room in the first place. I know so many people who, by the measures of these Looksmaxxers, should be far below me in terms of their attraction to women. They're shorter, they are fatter, they have less facial harmony or whatever. And yet, women find them incredibly attractive. More attractive than women find me. Why is that? Because these people are really cool to be around. In fact, I like to be around them as well. Probably more than I'd like to be around myself. I personally know why. I default to negative emotions. It's where I spend a lot of the time. And as a result, my perspective of the world changes quite often. I see it as a hopeless, terrible place. But when I work on this and I actively try to change my mindset, suddenly the world becomes nicer and people are nicer to me, and has nothing to do with the way I actually look. And these guys are just more positive people. Spending time writing about how much you hate women and how horrible they are because you don't look a certain way isn't going to make you very attractive to people. But going out, developing an actual personality, speaking to people, and being a fun guy to be around will make you more attractive to people,
even if you aren't the best looking human being. And just spending all your time focusing on becoming better looking sure might give you more attention on social media or first dates, but if you go on a first date and you're still this angry, bitter little prick, it's not going to last very long and you're not going to get anywhere from it. You need to go out and do things that make you interesting and change your perspective on the world. Go talk to people, and not just women. If your only goal for going outside is to try and get laid and speak to women, your intentions aren't good, and you're not going to get many positive results from it because people can sense what your underlying intentions are. Go out and speak to guys, women, anyone you can, not because you want anything from them, but because this is how you introduce yourself to people, and doing so will open up so many awesome opportunities in your life. Go listen to this podcast. This podcast is really eye-opening, and in the past I implemented something similar to this, and it did legitimately change my life. But when you do go outside, realize that where you go heavily impacts your perspective of the world. Like if you spend all your time in the hospital, you just assume that people by default are more sick than they actually are in real life. Or if you go to the gym, it'll skew your perspective and you'll just assume that the average person is much more fit than they really are. So if the only place you go outside is to the bar or the club, you'll probably think that people are more promiscuous and more degenerate than people actually are, because those types of environments attract those types of people on a more frequent basis. Go to brunch spots, dance classes, jazz evenings, do Pilates or yoga, or something that pushes you out of your comfort zone and is interesting and unique. Go to museums, car shows, somewhere with a vibe, or just do something that you find interesting. This will change your filter and the way you see the real world. Do something with people where the experiences become familiar and you'll bond with them, and from that you'll develop bigger social circles. And as a result, we'll meet more people who you'll likely get along with. See, the filter with which we look at the world changes our experience greatly. If your feed is full of good-looking dudes and that's where you think value lies, you of course are going to see all your shortcomings there and you're going to think you don't have any value. But if you go out and interact with the world and learn that your value doesn't only lie in your looks, you'll realize that there's so much more to life, and that you aren't as valueless as you think you are. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.